The Prime Minister preparing to attend the United Nations General Assembly, where world leaders will gather for high-level talks. Back to work. Baha Mar's general contractor is back on the job, assessing the work needed to complete the project. And a closed court session today during the Vasily murder trial. This is the Bahamas Tonight Late Night Edition. Starts now.
Now in HD. ZNS Network presents The Bahamas Tonight. This portion of the news brought to you by BTC Every Day.
The country's leader in New York City tonight to attend the United Nations General Assembly for high-level talks with his counterparts. This is the Bahamas Tonight, the late night edition. Good Thursday evening, everyone. I'm Altaviz Munnings. The 70th regular session of the UN General Assembly has attracted an even greater number of leaders as a special guest is expected to address them. Our Clint Watson is traveling with the Prime Minister in New York and tells us that a number of issues will be addressed.
World leaders will gather for their annual meeting at the United Nations starting tomorrow. Among them will be Prime Minister the Right Honorable Perry Christie and several of his cabinet colleagues. The General Assembly comes as Europe faces a flood of asylum seekers, many fleeing Syria's civil war and the worst humanitarian crisis since the world body was created 70 years ago. Islamic State will also top the agenda. U.S. President Barack Obama will host a counterterrorism meeting with over 100 countries invited that will address Islamic State, foreign terrorist fighters, and violent extremists. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov will chair a high-level UN Security Council meeting on counterterrorism. But before the marathon of speeches in the 193-member General Assembly starts on Monday, Pope Francis will address the United Nations on Friday ahead of a three-day summit with more than 150 world leaders that will formally adopt a global sustainable development agenda for the next 15 years. This meeting of the UN is believed to be the highest number of world leaders attending in UN history. The leaders making rare appearances for the United Nations' 70th anniversary include German Chancellor Angela Merkel, Cuban leader Raul Castro, and Russian President Vladimir Putin. China's President Xi Jinping, who is in the United States for an official visit this week, will make his UN debut. The new Sustainable Development Agenda, which was agreed by UN members last month, aims to wipe out hunger and extreme poverty, reduce inequality within and between countries, achieve gender equality, improve water management and energy, and urgently combat climate change. Pope Francis, a strong advocate for action to combat climate change, who in June issued the first papal document on the environment, will be the fifth pope to address the United Nations. En route to New York, Clint Watson, ZNS Network News.
Social Services and Community Development Minister, the Honorable Melanie Griffin, also in New York tonight. She heads to the United Nations to officially ratify the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Now, the process started back in 2013 when the country signed on, and then legislation was passed in Parliament, paving the way for equal opportunities for persons with disabilities.
I mean, it is a significant achievement for the community of persons with disabilities and for the Bahamas, because the Bahamas, joins the world in saying, look, we support and will make provisions for equal opportunities and rights for those persons in our country who are persons with disabilities, and so it is a significant achievement, particularly because it has been so long in coming.
It was back to the construction site for China Construction America as they take a look at what needs to be done to complete the multi-billion-dollar Bahamian Riviera on Cable Beach. And while this is good news for all parties involved, we talked to President of the Bahamas Contractors Association about what this really means for the local construction industry. He spoke with our CS Gatterly.
Baha Mar's joint provisional liquidators confirmed in a release Thursday that the resort's principal construction contractor, China Construction America, have returned to the Cable Beach site for analysis and assessment of the work necessary to complete the delayed $3.5 billion resort. Alistair Beveridge of Alex Partners says they're delighted to be working alongside CCA, revealing their role here is extremely important, and together they will now assess what needs to be done and how long it will take in order to complete Baha Mar, such that it may open its doors to the public and introduce thousands of new visitors to the Bahamas. He added that the work that is now being done will be jointly undertaken and will inform the next round of talks with all parties. Those talks will take place in due course following the completion of that assessment. This announcement comes as welcome news for the Bahamian Contractors Association. President Godfrey Forbes explains just how important these assessments will be.
When you find contractors leaving a particular site and they have to be off for a period of time, there are things that take place during that absence of time, and some cases there may very well be vandalism, and other things may have happened as a result of natural forces because of the fact that there was no one there to attend to it. And at this point in time, I think being on site now, carrying out an assessment to see exactly whether the entire site is basically the way it was left or whether there has been any negative impact on it during their absence, that is the thing that has to be determined in order to go ahead and evaluate exactly what is going to be required going forward to having it completed.
The BCA president remains confident now that the liquidators have been appointed, the final completion of the resort is imminent. C.S. Scatterly, ZNS Network News.
Saying the country lacks discipline, a former Court of Appeal president advised all Bahamians to be accountable. The retired justice was speaking at the installation ceremony and luncheon for the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators. And Jim and Anita Swain tells us tonight that government officials were also in attendance, and one of them shared their views on the situation.
The country is in a mess, no doubt about it. And I am not pointing fingers at any political party or any particular individuals.
Former president of the Court of Appeal and now patron of the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators Bahamas chapter, the Right Honorable Dame Joan Sawyer, with some blistering comments on crime and who the finger of blame should be directed towards. While Minister of State for Investments Kayla's Rule was also in agreement with her, saying by many measures the Bahamas is in a mess.
We use the protocols established by the UN, particularly regarding crime and murder, gun crimes. The Bahamas is in a conflict zone.
Referencing multi-million-dollar yachts outside of Luciano's restaurants and Atlantis in Plainview, the minister said the UN's designation is cause for concern. With not much diversity of the economy beyond tourism, Rose said things appear to have flatlined in the context of a national development plan.
Making decisions that make sense, that allowed us to grow and prosper. And then we hit that 80s, the infamous 80s, and we hit a brick wall. All other countries that we have benchmarked against started to grow, and we flatlined. And now we're paying the price for that.
Recently, the National Security Minister and the Commissioner of Police threw some blame at the judiciary, citing its lack of imposing stiffer penalties and not enforcing the laws on the books could be contributing to the crime problem. At last count, the murder toll stood at 110.
People complain about the judicial system, they complain about the judges, they complain about everybody. One of my speeches as president of the Court of Appeal some years ago, I remember very clearly telling them that you can't point fingers, because if you do, check yourself, because if you point the forefinger, 3 fingers are pointing back at you, and your thumb is pointing up in your nose. Check where you stand.
As for a solution to crime, Dame Jones said a 3-pronged approach should be taken.
First of all, you must deal swiftly with those matters that are pending before the courts. Get them out of the way and get those people off the streets if they are guilty. Secondly, you must deal with those who are incarcerated and see if any of them can be retrained for good service in the world. Thirdly, but most importantly, you must head off those who may be in danger from bad parenting or lack of parenting. and lack of education.
Chiminita Swain, ZNS Network News.
Legal discussions taking place today in the Donna Vasily murder trial. This after Crown prosecutors closed their case Wednesday without calling the last 4 witnesses named on the list. Defense attorneys then notified the court that they will be making legal submissions on behalf of their client, Donna Vasily. The Australian native is accused of killing her husband, Dr. Philip Vasily, at their Old Fort Bay home back in March. He was discovered lying in a pool of blood with a stab wound to the neck. Meantime, jurors have been excused until Monday to allow legal submissions to take place in their absence. Trimming the fat, health partners pushing toward a healthier Bahamas.
This portion of the news is brought to you by the new Shell and Lettuce, designed for extra miles.